Yeah, so this presentation is about a topic that's like pretty important to me, mainly because it is something that I've been personally dealing with, but also I've had a lot of peers who deal with this as well. So I hope that you guys find kind of feel the problem as we go through it. But welcome to the game design inclusivity problem. It is by yours truly. Really quickly, I briefly touched on my introduction. I'm Tamerlane. Hi. I grew up in the DMV. I was born and raised in Reston, Virginia. Occasionally made it out through the trenches of DC and visited Baltimore here and there. I have a BA in sociology in socioeconomics from UC San Diego. And I have about 10 years of game development experience. I escaped the DMV about 10 years ago to go to California so I could go and start off my career at Riot. I am a game designer, game economy designer, regression designer, product manager. All of these terms kind of overlap with each other, but if the broadest terms probably would be product manager and a systems game designer. I worked on League of Legends, Wild Rift, Teamfight Tactics, and then Call of Duty Mobile at Activision, Walking Dead Empires, and Kokomo Games were my brief stints into Web3 when I was looking for a job, and I was like, well, Web3. Okay. And then at OtherSide, I worked at Thick as Thieves, which launched and did not launch as intended, and Argos, which unfortunately was canceled. Sweet. So, oh man, the 2-week journey. Okay, so what essentially happened is that I hosted a podcast. I hit 30 years old and I engaged in the common trope of being a mask presenting and or a man, and realizing that there is nothing for me to do except host a podcast and talk about my thoughts. It's a canon event. I'm sure many of us have gone through it. But really, my initiative here was that I was trying to create a podcast that focuses around bringing in underrepresented views and voices in game design. It's called Designing Designers. We had 3 episodes before we got really stuck into the trenches. So like I what I wanted to do is like on my first episode, I had it was myself and my co-host, and he's a cis white man, so I was like, all right, well, we should make sure our second episode is a little bit more diverse. So we brought in a really amazing black narrative designer, Omar Yusuf. And then the next week after that, I was like, okay, cool. I really want to bring somebody in, like ideally, if we could bring someone who's femme, LGBTQ+, a woman who's a game systems designer. I'm going around into women in games. I'm going around to a bunch of these different discords. I'm like, guys, like, anyone that meets these qualifications or criteria, like I can't find this anywhere. I did have a coworker, but my company, didn't allow coworkers to work together formally on these types of initiatives. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Like I'll try to find somebody else. It took me about two to 3 weeks of actively looking to find anybody that met that like criteria. And then I thought about it while I was going through that. And I was like, wait a second. I've worked 10 years in game design, and like only at OtherSide have I ever encountered anybody who wasn't like a man, like as a game designer. And I was like, I worked at Riot, I worked at Activision, I worked at like a bunch of these other companies, and I'm like, dude, like it's just men all the way down. It's crazy. I wasn't really sure why that was. I mean, I knew why it was, but like at that time I was like, why is it so hard? And so it reminded me of this conversation that I had with literally like a game design director level person at Riot. I went to him because after you get hired, part of the people who were in your pipeline in your interview process at Riot, you're supposed to go back to like the lead positions in there and just be like, hey, like let's have a one-on-one, right? And like let's catch up 6 months in, right? These people are incredibly like difficult to book meetings with because they're very, very high up at the company. So it took me about 6 months to have that meeting with them. And I remember I said like, yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to work on League of Legends. Like my dream is to like be a game designer. And at the time I was a gameplay analyst. That's basically like a game design orientated playtester. And he just looked at me. He's just like, hey, aren't you Tamerlane? You're like in QA, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's just like, yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but like QA, they literally don't have the right brain for being game designers. And I was like, what? And it's just like, yeah, like, like game designers, we have like this unique brain. We're like special. Like there's something special about being a game designer. Like, not everyone can do it. You can't, in the same vein of a QA person can't turn into a game designer, an artist can't be a game designer, right? Like, certain types of people can be game designers, but I mean, you're in QA, so not you. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And there are probably a lot of things wrong with this, but I'm 20 years old and I haven't gone to college yet, so I have literally no idea what that. My critical thinking wasn't quite like fleshed out at the time. And I was sitting there going like, something seems odd about this, and I'm not sure why. And I kind of learned it through the next part of my journey, but there were serious ramifications to it. And one of those was self-doubt. I was like, wow. I guess I am going to be stuck perpetually in this role that I got in at Riot. That my only qualification was being good at League of Legends, and like, I mean, that's cool and all, but then I was like, I guess I'm never going to be able to deviate. I guess I shouldn't have ambition. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, dude, like that felt like very I mean, eugenics adjacent, like kind of like greater than thou, energy as well. And it really taught me a lot about the experience. I realized as I reflected on it that, dude, it's everywhere, right? In 10 years in the gaming industry, I was like, wow, there are universal truths. And one of those universal truths is that game designers and the game design discipline in general is like incredibly uninclusive and gatekeeping. And it's something. And the opinions that that game designer that I spoke to stated to me, I realized were subtly in there in a lot of the old guard, kind of in the backing of being specialized in game design, and being having this like unique thought process that just makes them so different than everybody else. They think about games in a special way that nobody else thinks about, right? I just came from OtherSide, and we had some industry leaders who you could kind of hear that subtlety as well, like in the way they communicate about like the design brain, the design philosophy, right? And like when I chatted with other disciplines at other companies, like you'll oftentimes say like engineers being like, yeah, like I don't really contribute to the design goals because like they don't really care about my opinion because I'm an engineer and like I don't have the right perspective on it and all that. And I've always felt it just was really odd. And then they use that though, and then it's usually framed as, oh, like this is like a meritocracy, like the best can get in here, and that's ultimately like the way they advocate for it, which I can't really agree with it, because at the end of the day, guess what? A toddler can make games. And what I mean by that is that I don't want to dismiss game designers, but I don't know about you guys. Maybe you didn't. But when I was a kid, I used to pretend that I was a Pokemon. And I'd play Pokemon, like as I was like a little like 5-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, whatever. And I'd be like, dude, like this is my favorite Pokemon. And I like sat down with my cousins and I'd be like, blah, blah, blah. And we'd invent this entire game experience, right? We would design our own game. And then if you think about it, in general, human beings as toddlers, as kids, we invent our own games in perpetuity, right? Yes, I would fight animals, exactly. The floor is lava, I'm a Pokemon. We invented these rules, we invented these systems, and we invented fun, essentially, from literally nothing. So, in essence, we all start as game designers, right? So, if that's the case, then why is there this weird inclusivity problem? Why aren't you able to access the opportunity of being a game designer? And it comes down to this concept of filters, which I'll touch on and discuss kind of more in depth here. But there are 3 filters that I've felt are probably the most impactful towards your capacity to access game design. Game design has a combat culture of critique. And what I mean by that is, when you make a thing, Especially if we're indie game devs as well. Like, you make a thing, people don't like it. Holy shit, you can get some pretty harsh feedback on Steam or on discussions. But that's essentially the game design in a nutshell. Is that you're confronted from your peers in perpetuity to that same level of aggression that you get from players. Uh, Intersectional, socioeconomic, and gender access. Quite frankly, guys, most game developers who work in AAA and AA, especially, come from very affluent backgrounds. It is a very disconnected kind of orientation. We'll talk about it more in depth, but generally speaking, it's like I want to say close to 90% of people come from upper middle class to upper middle class backgrounds. So there's not much representation of people in poverty, and the culture fit, which is if any of us work in any tech companies or have worked in tech companies, they're like, well, we're a family oriented company here. We're trying to find somebody who's the perfect culture fit, blah blah blah. More or less, I'm trying to hire somebody that's like me, right? So, a culture of critique. I oftentimes I've mentored people when I was at UC San Diego in design. They have a couple. There's no traditional game design club or anything like that. But we recently, made a video game development club that was a lot more active. But I give feedback to people, and the people would be like, Tamerlane, you're being really mean, and I'm like, am I being mean? I feel like I'm just giving you feedback. I'm trying to make sure that you understand the design risks of your product. I'm challenging you to be better, right? And then I thought about it, and I realized, no, actually, I am being really mean. Really, there's no need to be as aggressive as I was being, but simply said, that's just how I was paved in that. At Riot, we had a one of our pillars. I don't believe it's a pillar anymore. One of the pillar that we had was a challenge convention, right? If someone did a thing, we don't just continue to do the same thing just because we've done it before. We should always challenge it. Now, on paper, that's super healthy. I think it's a really good thing to not engage in conformity. The problem, though, is that it also meant that anyone could go to anybody and tell them that they're wrong, regardless of their discipline. So I remember when I was starting to work on my own design changes, I was working on the rework of Fiddlesticks with another designer, and I was planning it out, and we would just get these people who, these inconspicuous 2 or 3 rioters who played Fiddlesticks pre-rework, and they'd be like, "You're ruining the character," and we're like, "Okay, why?" And they're just like, "I hate it. It's impacting my life. I don't want this. It'll make me not want to play my character anymore." And I'm just like, none of this is. You're being a player right now. You're not telling us anything, right? And they would just contest you. When we were reworking Evelyn, we would get people who were very against stuff like sexuality and expression of sexuality because she's a succubus. They're like, she's too sexy. I'm religious. It makes me feel bad, and I'm like, she's a succubus. She's a demon. I don't get it. And when we would create changes and mechanical changes to the character, we would get challenged as well. Now, when we would actually when we're going past the game developers that we would engage in, we also have our designer peers who would engage with us. And every single time that you make any change list in any capacity, nobody says, it doesn't matter if it's like a -3 armor, +2 whatever AD. People are gonna be like, why are you doing that? Explain why you're doing that. And what that resulted in is this culture of every change needed to have a clear design goal, and then an explanation, and then you would send that out to a broad email. And that mitigated the risk of the challenge, but you would still get contested quite often, especially in meetings. And then, sometimes even the smallest changes would result in you having a 1 or 2 hour whiteboard meeting to bounce ideas off each other on whether or not that's the right solution. And I'll be honest, guys, dude, I loved that shit. It was actually so fun for me. But that's not fun for everybody. It actually gets really tiresome. And eventually you're just like, hey, I've shipped a lot of good stuff. Can you trust me on my -2 armor change on Graves? And they're like, nope, we got to continue, right? So what that results in is this premise of this culture of critique where you pitch something and you have to expect that the Armageddon is going to come out and attack you. And then when you're contested, you need to then defend yourself. in the same way that you would defend yourself like in a debate, except you actually don't have the agency to defend yourself in a debate in this case, because you're arguing as a junior designer oftentimes against this 20-year, 30-year, 40-year veteran, this guy that might have shipped some of the most legendary pieces of content, and you're sitting there trying to argue against them. At Riot, I would argue against people who made characters that, impacted 180 million people. And then I'm sitting there as a 20-year-old going like, how do I convince this guy who like is actually an expert in his field that I'm right and that he's wrong? It's like there's no way, right? Like in the same vein, I worked at OtherSide, and if anyone here is familiar with like Warren Spector and Paul Neurath, like they're legendaries in the industry as well. And I'm sitting there going like, I'm 30, and like, yeah, I'm very confident in my experiences, but how do I convince them when there are these legends, that have innovated the entire industry? How do I convince them? So defending on paper shouldn't be a losing proposition if everyone is on an equal playing field, but we're not, right? Well, you have to defend yourself against people who are equipped, and you're oftentimes not equipped. And then when you fail on defending yourself, then guess what? You failed. Iteration is needed. There's one line that I didn't put in there, which is like, if you fail enough times, I mean, you're gonna get put on a pip, and then you lose your job, right? Which just filters you out. So let's take that into account, and let's also take into account the social structures and cultural expectations as well. Argumentative nature of design, for example. In American society, in Western society, generally speaking, like, there are certain types of people that are encouraged to engage in these arguments and like these, and also be like willing to defend themselves. And then there are certain types of people who are not encouraged to do so. And this is very much gendered, as an example. Whether it be your gender identity or your sex, like biological sex, women in general like are encouraged not to be as argumentative, societally wise. Not, I hope in our spaces as we are getting more inclusive that we're less like that. But in general, like that's an upbringing issue, right? We have cultural expectations where, like, what if you're from an area that really admonishes you for engaging in like very heated debates? What if like culturally I'm supposed to defer to people who are older than I am? In my culture, I'm half Persian. If I were to argue against someone who's 40 or 50, dude, I'm getting blasted. The sandals coming out, kind of shit, right? And I'm even at 30, and so as a result, like it's challenging to be able to then get into that mindset of being really, really ready to defend yourself and argue and fight to the death on every design decision. And so I was chatting with a junior designer recently, and they asked me directly. They said, like, what is the hardest part of design? I said, the fact that everything that you do, you should be prepared to go to war for. And they're like, is that fun? And I'm like, I mean, I think it's fun. You might not think it's fun. But that really leads to one filter. So going to the next slide, we've got the intersectional socioeconomic and gender access slide. Dude, yeah, I mentioned it briefly. Generally speaking, game developers outside of indie, so AA and AAA, are very wealthy. I put a GDC state of play at the bottom, but here's a very interesting metric that I should have cited here. But the ESA stated that 80% of people who owned a PS2 in 2004, 2005, so ESA being the, I actually don't know what the acronym stands for, Entertainment Software Association? So it seems right. They essentially stated that 80% of people who own a PS2 are white families. And then you take that statistic and you correlate it towards the wealth allocation that existed at the time, people who could engage in buying a PS2. This is the PS2, by the way. The PS2 had that was when they brought in Blu-ray, right? So everyone was buying that. And despite that, it was still not really like that widely accessible. Consoles in general, or even when they were loss leaders, weren't widely accessible. And then those allocations of those consoles then have a correlation towards who's able to engage in games later. Because ultimately, game developers almost universally have this background of they grew up with games, right? They played games. That was a part of their life. That you don't really see a lot of people saying, let me take a 70% market cut from in my role and engage in the passion tax unless they're doing it for the love of the game, right? Like, you know, in AAA, you're making less money than you would be making if you were working at an equivalent tech company. And then on top of that, like no one contesting your ability to play is another factor, right? Oftentimes, if you're from an Asian background, you'd be like, "Why aren't you studying?" If you're from a Persian background, I guess that too. If you're a woman, you know, you might have been told like, "Why aren't you playing with dolls instead of playing Sonic Adventure 2 Battle?" Right? Who knows? There are a bunch of rationalizations that prevent you from being able to engage in playing. And as a result, there tends to be a positive correlation between wealth, gender identity, and a representation in game development. So as you know, in GDC releases a state of play survey every year. In 2025, 67% of game developers are that are in AAA and AA are white men. 89% of game developers with over 5 years of experience are white men. And that essentially like correlates to an even more extreme example of 93% of game developers with in leadership positions are white men. To be clear, by the way, this is exponentially better than it was 5 years ago. Like these metrics are horrible, but they were so much worse. So we're improving, just not fast enough and not meaningfully enough. And my personal concern is that we're potentially going into the wrong direction with the current issues that are that exist in accessibility in games or socioeconomic accessibility right now. You know, games are getting even more expensive. So moving from that, the culture fit. Teams really, what they do is they hire people who relate to them. You know, as I mentioned to you guys, like I worked in game development for 10 years, and up until OtherSide, I'd never worked with a game designer who identified as a woman or was femme presenting or anything like that. And I really wasn't sure why that was until I was chatting with my former coworker Valerie, where I was like, "Hey, like, why haven't I been able to? Why is this the case?" And they're just like, "Well, you know, they." She was telling me, she's like, "Well, I've been told by people like I'm too emotional. I've been told by people that you know, my idea wasn't that great, and that they would just kind of regurgitate my same idea back in a meeting and take credit for it. You get infantilized. It's a pretty common trope. And then there's always the old guard. A lot of these old veteran game designers who maintain their perspectives and are unwilling to kind of compromise on their beliefs and just think that the way that they've done it was the way that we should always do it. That game development is not a field that needs to adapt to the changes of the world and all that. But there are ways that we can tackle it. You know, what I've kind of been tackling it through was through a couple of different means. Game designers in general, like what we can do is we can go into these spaces where with players. Oftentimes, you know, I'm sure many of us who've played tested our games, you know, we sit there and we watch our players, we listen to them, and we kind of engage without invalidating their feedback. And the reason this is relevant to us as game designers is that when we, as the designer, have the agency to do so, that allows us to kind of empower voices that may not necessarily feel confident in being able to like engage in this type of dialogue, which I'll talk about later as well as we're going through it. But in that same vein, replace players with your peers, and you listen to them, you hear them, and you make them feel heard and seen through their feedback, and avoid that risk of invalidating what is being said. Generally, when you're in a meeting with your peers, if an idea is raised, then they're not heard, you know, reinforce them, right? What I like to do is, you know, if someone says something, it doesn't, for me, it's not a matter of like I'm trying to elevate everybody. I just do this universally. It's like if someone says something, it's not heard. I'm like, hey, did we hear blah blah blah's idea? This person said this, and I think it's a good idea. If I think it's a good idea, and that helps a lot. But then there's the final point. Ultimately, is that when you're in these spaces, you have, I think we might have heard about this concept called the dining table problem. And what that essentially means is that, you know, given a scenario where there are, you know, usually they use it with Nazis, right? They say like if there are 10 people at a table and there's one Nazi, then there's 11 Nazis at a table, kind of thing. In the same vein, if you're in a space that's not being inclusive towards women or marginalized people, and you're finding that it's too challenging. You're finding that they're having a very difficult time being able to assimilate. Oh man, I hate that term here. But find themselves like adequately able to advocate for themselves. Then the way that you handle that is that you have to continue making everybody at the dining table follow suit, right, and engaging in that process of elevating. That way, we all grow collectively as a collaboration. Otherwise, we're all the problem, and we're contributing to the problem. When I say when I say my experiences, I mean what I've been doing personally is when I was working at on Thick as Thieves, I would regularly go onto our we had a Discord community, and players like to give feedback. And so what I've personally done is I go in there and I'm like, hey, like I love this feedback, guys. Like, to be clear, like some of the feedback wasn't really that great, and like some of them was like, let's do these changes to your game, and like like let's make the game like completely not what it's intended to be. But what I still do is I frame it as there's no real wrong answer in game design. We just might disagree on whether or not it's worth putting in the game, and that's okay. We're allowed to disagree, but I'm not allowed to tell you your design is bad, unless it's like actually like the most ridiculous. No, I'm just kidding. But like so there was this kid. It was like a 14, 15-year-old kid who was in our Discord. He said he was a teen, so I'm just assuming around that age. And he was posting every day, like giving feedback on Thick as Thieves. And like a couple of my peers were like, dude, he's like this guy's ideas are terrible, and I'm like, it's okay. Let me handle this. I go in there, I'm like, yo, love the ideas, keep them coming. And my peers are like, dude, like they're bad. And I'm like, it's fine. It doesn't matter. We're not going to use none of the ideas and the feedback we're actually going to implement. Like, if anything, because of legal reasons, right? Like, we're not going to take somebody's idea and just like change our game. And then they're going to be like, what the heck? That was my idea. Look, that kind of thing. Like, none of that would have ever happened. We might innovate on their ideas, but regardless, like, just encourage them to talk about design, especially a kid, like make them feel like they can continue to engage in this mindset and continue to engage in their craft, because that's ultimately what it really is. This game design is, me as a 14-year-old, I probably had some crazy ass takes on how to make a game better. That was the same thing happening here, but what helped me is being encouraged and being told that like oh, keep exploring that. Let's keep seeing more. I want to hear more. I want to, and then having people kind of casually, lightly challenge me to make me feel comfortable, defending my ideas and justifying them and validating them. And really what that stemmed from is I have this experience that happened at BlizzCon. I was a super young kid. I want to say 16. I went to my first BlizzCon. I was a big World of Warcraft player. And I played a Resto Shaman. I was a big Shaman fiend. I was very proud of being a Shaman player. So I went to BlizzCon, and I saw this designer. I was like, wait, I think I know this designer. I saw their tag, and I was like, oh my god, that's this guy on the forums. He posts all the time, and I ran up to him. Oh my god, hi, and he's just like, oh, hi, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a big fan. I love like the work, and you worked on my favorite class, and like it's impacted my life, and blah blah blah. And he's just like, oh yeah, like that's awesome. And then I'm just like, I have so many ideas. I want to talk to you. And it's like, dude, I'm a 16-year-old kid. This guy's like, he's at the Hilton Hotel at Anaheim. He's having a fucking time. This guy grabs me and he says, let's chat for like half an hour. Just tell me your ideas. Tell me what you're thinking about the like shaman. Like where's your head at? What do you like about WoW? What do you not like about WoW? Blah, blah, blah. For half an hour, I just yapped to this guy about some random bullshit about World of Warcraft and what changed my life about it and what I was enjoying. And he gave me these good questions and all that. And then he said, hey man, hit me up in like 10 years. I want to see like where you're at, kind of thing, right? And it's like, obviously it's just in passing. He's just like, not really like that serious, right? I completely forgot about this event that happened. Dude, I went to a rave last year. I see this guy, same dyed hair, and I'm like, wait a second, is that? And I run up, oh my god, is it? And he's just like, yeah, what the? I don't know you actually. It's like, who are you? And I was like, oh yeah, we met literally 14 years ago. I'm Tamerlane. I was that Resto Shaman little kid that like you offered a drink to, but then I was like, I'm 16. You're like, oh my god, and he was like, oh, wait, okay, so we're, what's up? And I was like, well, years ago you told me to hit you up and tell you where I was at like 10 years ago. Well, I'm a little late, 14 years ago, but I just wanted to let you know, like, that conversation triggered my capacity to be able to engage in game dev. I've been a game designer now for 10 years, and I just wanted to let you know that, like, you taking 30 minutes on me to make me feel like this path and this journey was worth taking, and that, like, my ideas were valid, empowered me to be able to get into that direction, and be able to flow into and become who I am today. Like, literally, I think that conversation was my core canon event that triggered my entire journey into pursuing a career in game development. And okay, context, guys, like, we were incredibly drunk. It's a rave. We're both crying. It was great. I loved it. I was having a good time, and he was having a good time. And we've connected. We're good friends now. But it's like, I I think it's those types of experiences where, like, we don't really realize the agency we have in game development to just simply, like, encourage people who want to pursue it, and encouraging people and and being kind and letting people feel heard and seen is oftentimes the best way, really, to make a place more inclusive. Um, so when it comes to the inclusivity problem, right? Uh, the overarching question ultimately is it fixable? And it is, through elevating your peers' voices, through engaging in mentorship and engaging in these positive communities, and honestly just reaffirming to yourself that game design and being a game designer isn't a special privilege. You guys can help make this better. And what I mean by that is really, like, I don't we can't we this is one of those things where it's the rare opportunity to say I don't think it's possible to fix it top down, culturally. It's fixable from bottom up, and this is where we come into the spaces, and we make our own space, right? We force ourselves to be the designers, or into and be able to create games into with our own craft, and we mandate that people recognize us. Now that's easier said than done, and that means that and we have different personalities who are going to be engaging in this. So it's a collective issue. We'll all have to work together to be able to make the next generation of game developers find the space safer than it is today and it was yesterday. So, why did it take 2 weeks, right? It's not because women can't design games. It's not because LGBTQ plus people can't design games. It's really just ultimately because the industry built these arbitrary filters, and they're basically like, yeah, these filters make sure the best talent gets in. And it's not actually that. What it does is it ensures that the loudest voices that have the maximum privilege are able to get in. And it rarely allows the agency for people who come from less privileged backgrounds to be able to engage in those spaces, even though they may have brilliant ideas. So, oh god, my bad. This slide is awful. At the end of the day, game design is so easy that a toddler can do it. But the hard part is doing it regardless of the obstacles. I thought that those two slides hit harder. They hit harder when I was writing them yesterday. All right, cool. That's basically it. Any Q&A?
Oh, that's
Yeah, I have a question. Can any of us make questions? Is this the time to make them?
What's up? Sorry.
yes.
Fantastic. So, seeing the latest layoffs in the industry, and they seem to be coming. How do you see some of the things that you do at Riot today? Those positions, a lot of them are hyper specialized. Do you foresee them continue to be hyper specialized in the future?
Yes, but I think they're going to be engaged in co-devs and outsource. It's too expensive to have like very niche design specialization nowadays. in the US, especially. I mean, Riot is fine for now, for themselves, because they're making money like crazy. But for a lot of these other companies, like my friend is owns a game dev studio, or is a founder of a game dev studio, and he's been wanting to hire me, but he's just like, oh man, but I can't justify a progression specialized game designer for this product as a full-time hire, or even a part-time hire. Like, that's too niche. And I'm like, it's true. Like, he would rather have a generalist and then get everything at like 50% velocity instead, than have like 100% in terms of that specialization. So I guess like it's important to have specializations in AAA and AA, but it's probably safer to be a generalist in like the indie space, just because like you can't, right now I'm working on this indie project with a couple of friends, and I'm like, dude, like my niche is so like unuseful into what we're doing, right? So I'm actually I just got converted into biz dev instead, right? But I'm able to still support as a game designer, which is nice. But I'm not able to, like, it's like if you tell me go into Unreal and start blueprinting stuff out, I'm like, dude, I mean I can, but I'm gonna be so slow at it, I'm just not. It's not something that I'm equipped with, because I didn't build up from a foundation of generalization.
Alrighty, thank you.
Hey, Tamerlane, I have a question sort of related to codev. You mentioned codev. A lot of indies will cut their teeth, especially as generalists as indie devs, and then find their way into codev studios. What are your thoughts on that versus applying directly to the studio that's making the game? Is that perhaps an easier approach with fewer filters, or do you face the same issues?
Yeah, I mean, in the ecosystem we're in right now, I think it's definitely a much easier issue. I think I know a couple of people out on the East Coast that like work at like I think Pipeworks, for example, Pipeworks Studio. And I know a couple of people who work at other Virtuo studios as well on the East Coast. But yeah, like in general, like getting into the codev space is dramatically easier than getting into the AA AAA space. And honestly, like unless you have like those referrals and like the most egregiously amazing portfolio, it's probably going to be an easier sell to get into codev. Now, codev is still beneficial because you're still, if you're a US based one, generally speaking, you're still getting a 401k, and you're still getting like the benefits and all that. And quite frankly, I think it actually is nice for you, because you're getting more experience, I would say, than you would get on like a AA or AAA product. It's actually probably better for your career, I would argue, because you get to work on more games, right? That's the key thing. Is like like my first 5 years in game dev, when I worked at Riot and then at Activision, they're both games as a service products. I actually didn't ship a single game. So when there were these companies that'd be like, oh yeah, like we're looking for a game designer for this particular role, you need to have shipped 2 games end to end. I'm like, what the heck? I've shipped 0, like I haven't shipped anything, and I managed to convince some recruiters that like shipping a League of Legends season counts as shipping a game, but like in the grand scheme of things, like you probably get less experience in AAA and AA versus a codev, arguably. So it may be better for your career long term, to then allow you to be in a better position when you actually enter AAA. Maybe more leadership orientated, or higher IC, principal or senior, rather than junior mid level.
Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Building off of our talk about specialization, do you find that some specializations are more accepting of diverse voices than others? I would imagine that maybe economy design and like more social features would maybe be a little less gatekeepy than like combat or these other, typically like male dominated ideas. But I don't know. I mean, it's all numbers at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, economy design, honestly, like there's so few of us that like I take great pride in the fact that we are such a diverse group of people in economy design, because there's like 7 of us that I know of, and there's like 3 women, and I'm like, look at that, guys, 40% representation. But there's literally like, yeah, we just there are a lot of economy designers, but they generally just label themselves as systems designers, and then they just do economy, and they don't really specialize in it that way. So I would say generally speaking, it's probably the same issue as the broader game design discipline. Social features, no, I feel like it's almost exclusively men. I can't imagine. I haven't thought. I haven't. I'm trying to think if I've ever met anybody that worked on any social features that. I mean, UI UX is definitely pretty inclusive, but that's just like in that same vein, though. UI UX tends to be very much like art adjacent, right? In the same vein, level design is very art adjacent. So I've also felt that level design and world building tend to also be like very inclusive, but I mean, they're parts of the discipline that are like in the Venn diagram, like slipping into art, right? Which then says more about art being a pretty inclusive space, you know, in comparison to design. So yeah, not really. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, no. I think it's anything that any part of the design discipline culture that engages in that very combative methodology tends to be pretty not inclusive.
I've been trying to think of the best way to word it. So if anybody follows game news recently, there's 3,200 layoffs at Microsoft right now, right? And so there's a lot of game developers and game designers kind of wildly roaming the open job market. My question is with that enormous shift in the number of like design positions and people in those roles, like, do you see like a shifting of the old guard? Do you think that they're still in place and they stayed there? Like, how do you think that'll affect like inclusivity going forward?
That's a good question. So 1,600 layoffs have happened so far. The other 1,600 are happening in the next, I think, 6 months, I want to say. And then we had another like 400-ish companies, not 400-ish companies, 400 people from companies, including my studio, all shuttered basically. So in terms of like how that affects like the open job market, I mean, we may just see a lot of these people make their own studios, which kind of just propagates the issue into another space. A lot of the people who got laid off from Microsoft, they're really great people. A lot of them are really good at what they do. A lot of them are also like very, very, very ancient in their fields. If you looked at like if anyone here is active on LinkedIn and looked at the people who got laid off, you see people who were like at like Microsoft for like 15 years, 20 years, and I'm like, yikes, guys. That's gonna be a fun time on the job market if you like think that it's anything like it was 20 years ago. And I've been working with a lot of these people. A lot of them are really kind. A lot of them do have outdated views, I would say, on a lot of different things. I'm active in the ASGC community, the Amir Saadvat community, and I've been trying to mentor a couple of these folks who got laid off. Now, in terms of like shifting in the old guard, no, I don't think so, really. I think that the mentality requires there to kind of see a way bigger warping. The percentage of people that care about these issues is so small. We have, what is it, like a little over 100,000 amount of game devs in the US, I believe, that work in AAA and AA, I believe. Maybe I believe that might count India as well. And 1,600 people. I mean, that's a percentage, sure. But they're gonna come back into the industry. Like, and people are pretending that they're never gonna get jobs again. I'm like, no, they're gonna come back. Like, it's gonna happen. I got laid off, and I'm seeing interviews pop up for myself. My peers are getting interviews. Like, we're likely gonna get back onto our feet at some point. And these mentalities, because they didn't get laid off because of an issue with their culture, they got laid off because Microsoft is dumb. Like they're being silly and they're very short-sighted. So maybe that was a spicy statement, but whatever, it's fine. So When they retire, sure. When they leave the industry, sure. But it requires us as the younger generations to talk about it and make sure that this is an issue that's on the forefront of our minds. Otherwise, it's just going to be a cyclical issue. Because what's just going to happen is that, like, guys, like until like 5 years ago, when I like decided that I actually cared about these issues, I was just some like guy that didn't bat an eye about the issue. I didn't even think about it. You know, like it took, you know, I said 10 years ago, like the brain thing was like brought up to me. I accepted it. I was like, okay, sure. Game designers are like special, I guess, whatever. But then 5 years ago, you know, I don't know, maybe my frontal lobe developed because I turned 25 and I was like, wait a second, that's not right. You know, and I started thinking about it a little bit more deeply. So I think on my end, like, I know that there's a pathway that I could have fallen into the trap, and I would have been reinforcing these same negative beliefs if I didn't like dive deeper into it. And I think it requires us to sit down, be confronted with these issues, and then think about it, and then help be the change we want to be. And then as a collaboration, as a collective, we're able to change it. It certainly will never be done through passive play, right? We have to be active allies.
And go ahead.
Oh, can I? Okay. Since you are in the industry, and probably everybody is already tired of hearing about this, but the impact of AI. So, of course, studios have seen some pushback here and there, but how is that behind the scenes? So they're really trying to figure out a way to make sure they don't rehire these people back, right? I can imagine that the studios would be trying to fit AI in a way that, like replace people for good, so they don't have to deal with pesky, developers. What do you think?
So let me just make sure I understand the question correctly.
My question is more like, if AI can even do that, this replacement that everybody's afraid of.
Oh, sure. I mean, so I'm pretty active in these industry leader spaces. I was at GamesBeat Los Angeles recently, talking to a bunch of like high end companies, and I was at a closed door roundtable for AI. Because I'm pretty interested in AI, not in the same generative AI space. I work with data, so I've been using AI for probably like a decade and a half, right? Like machine learning stuff, right? Kind of avenue. My pet projects and other types of works, K factor sequencing, whatever, that kind of stuff. If any data geeks are out here, it's so much fun. I love it. As I chat with folks about it, AI is definitely like something that most leaders seem to be very interested in, very invested in. But in the same vein, we also have a lot of people who are in leadership who are saying, "But we want to do it in tandem with our developers to ensure that we can reduce our the costs allocated with development, whatever that means." GTA 6 cost, what is it, like $2 billion to ship? Like, I think it's $1.5 billion slated to be $2 billion by the time the game launches. So it's insane. The games shouldn't cost that much money. My game Thick as Thieves, I want to say, costs like $30 million to develop. I'm like, for what, right? Like, what are we doing? Like, it's wild that a lot of these products cost as much as they do. And so ultimately, AI helps for now, while subsidized, alleviate a lot of these problems to mitigate it. Now, essentially, these companies, depending on the company, they don't really have any qualms against hiring people again if they got laid off, and it's not a matter of AI replacing them. Microsoft specifically actually just ran into a number problem. It's not even an AI thing. It's just literally like it was just literally like a numbers problem. If you looked at a lot of the studios that got shuttered or got laid off, people got laid off, etc. Like, some of them hadn't shipped games in like 8 years while playing like Microsoft level like salaries, right? And I'm like, guys, like, that's actually insane. Here's the thing. You guys are indie devs. I'm gonna tell you this right now. Imagine working at a company with like 35 people and your daily burn, and burn being defined as how much money you're just using every day, is $13,000 per day. And then think about the return of investment that you need on your product. That's a 30-person team. Now imagine Microsoft, which way higher salaries, something like that. That burn is probably like $100K a day. And you're like, dude, what the fuck are we have to ship to like actually get to the point where this is like, like worth it, right? That's insane. It is actually untenable, and like, this is actually the problem that we have in game development is like, how do we create a product that doesn't burn $365 million or $36.5 million a year, right? Like that's insane. And then take 8 years to develop, and then you launch the game and it launches and it makes 50 million. You're like, well, I just lost like 180 million whatever dollars, or I just did math poorly. Don't judge me on my economy design skills there, but you know, like it's a very big losing proposition. And then if you take into account inflation, God, don't even get me started there. It gets crazy real fast. So you have to make games cheaper, and that's why if you look at publishers right now for like indie devs, like people are literally like putting out money into, like, people are saying like, oh, there's no money in publishing right now, and I'm like, or like in indies right now, like nobody's investing. I'm like, no, dude, they're investing left and right. But the moment that you say that I need some of this money to pay myself, they're like, all right, we're out. Right? Like they'll give you that $1 million, you know, that $500,000. They're not going to give you more than $1 million, but $500,000, $1 million to make your game, as long as you do not take a single cent to survive. They don't want that. They want you to say you're going to use all of that money, and then they want to see your go-to-market plan to showcase what you're going to do with that money in every avenue to make the game as viral as possible. Have the have the highest potential K-market. K-factor, the highest potential K-factor possible, or aka virality. But like, and so, you know, I remember I was talking to an angel investor on my project, and the guy was like, I'm so totally down to pay. Why is there a section here for operations? And I was like, oh yeah, like, because we have to pay rent. They're like, I don't care. And I'm like, oh shit. You know, like, my bad. You know, they're like, you should be in it for the love of the game. And I'm like, oh man, okay, cool. Love of the game and food. But in essence, to go back to like the overarching statement, because this was an AI question. No, I mean they're gonna be fine. AI is not gonna be the issue. The issue is ultimately gonna be cost, and cost and AI are gonna have a very big reckoning event soon, as we stop subsidizing a lot of these AI costs, and as we start seeing how expensive it truly is. Yeah, I mean, hey, like, I'm sure you guys have heard of the AI bubble. We're gonna see it happen, I'm sure, you know, in the next maybe 3 months to a year, at any point. We're in that 2007 era right now.
Thank you.
So what you did at Riot of balancing and things like that, do you see AI doing that? Because StarCraft and Heroes of the Storm, ancient games, are getting patches right now, and a lot of the community are wondering, like, are these vibe coded? Because they look a little weird and funky, and the changes are all you know, unusual. Do you see Riot implementing something like that in the future, perhaps?
Riot specifically, no. Of course not, no. Riot is so, like, they're very, it would have to take a lot for Riot to start to change their, like, philosophy on design, I think. And honestly, like, to be real here, like, a lot of what we do at Riot when we do our design changes, sometimes they're just vibes. And AI can't emulate, like, this, like, I wonder if I do this change, you know, kind of thing, right? Like, the AI requires you to put a prompt in, and then it'll give you an outcome, right? With that, so it's like a put something in, get something out. But like, can it form your own hypotheses right now? Sorry, I have a lisp. Can it make you want to experiment with the game in the live state, and, like, you know, just kind of engage in these kind of like behaviors to shift the balance? At the moment, I want to say no. We're not AGI. Like, it's not. The AI is not pondering yet. The AI is. I mean, Claude will like to pretend that it's pondering for you with the way that it's loading, but it's not actually thinking. It's just, you know, engaging in a sequence of algorithms to get to an outcome. So, I think for now, no. If we achieve AGI, which we probably won't, but if we did, then we've made God anyway. So I guess it doesn't matter, huh? But to answer, I guess, the question overall, like, about StarCraft, I had no idea about that. I haven't heard about that at all. But that's interesting. I hadn't seen that. But the thing is, at Riot, they don't want to make the game perfectly balanced. That's the key thing. It's a flawed strategy. If you make a game perfectly balanced, it's a boring game. You don't want that. You want the game to be slightly unbalanced in one way or another based on whatever your subjective perspectives are. AI, and since AI doesn't have the capacity to engage in subjective perspectives, then I don't really see a reason that it can be automated.
Anyone else have any questions?
Oh, I had a real quick question. I just want to say thank you so much for doing this talk. This has been really cool to get some kind of insight from the industry on these issues, because I know these are really I mean, just really challenging, kind of historically intractable kinds of things. So I like the kind of more empowering, kind of hopeful tone to it. It's like it's acknowledging that there's an issue, but that, like, you know, the framing of, oh, this is something that is sort of needs to kind of bubble up from the bottom, instead of sort of just hoping for, you know, the old guard to just like suddenly be like, oh, interesting, we don't have enough representation in these different spaces, we should do something about that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to that point, a lot of questions, but I obviously only have time for like probably like the one, but I was just gonna say, you know, regarding, you know, like thinking back when, you know, that person was like, oh, you you just, you know, don't have the kind of brain that you need to do this kind of thing, yeah, which it's insane. So I personally am yeah, huge anti-fan of that kind of thinking. I think that, you know, you can do just about anything. The more important thing is what's interest to you, and with that passion, you can, even if you don't click with something, you can just learn how to do it anyways. So big fan of thinking about things in that way. So that's all to say. If you, let's say someone today came to you and had a similar conversation with someone where they had been told, oh, you can't do this because that's just not like, that's not kind of the kind of person that you are. You can't, you know what I mean? So yeah, what kind of stuff would you say to them today to like try to help re-encourage them and not let them get discouraged from following their passion?
Gotcha. So in the scenario, it's someone. Basically, it would just be reframed as someone who went through my own experiences.
Yeah,
How would I talk to
that's
them?
right.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. Okay. Oh man, I've had this thought so many times actually. I I am someone who is driven by spite. Um, People have told me I'm a spiteful little troll is the way that I've kind of been, and so you know, getting into game design in general, or getting into game development in general, was me rejecting my family. My family said you can't go into game development. Literally, nobody gets a job there. It's not going to get you any money. I said, screw that. I'm going to California. Bye. And when the guy told me I can't be a game designer, I was like, screw that. I'm going to be a game designer. I literally don't care. Like, tell me no, I'm going to get mad, right? And in my career, as I've reflected on it, it's all of my biggest successes have come from the fact when I've rejected people telling me you can't do this thing for no other reason other than this is just how it is, right? If they give me a reason, dude, I'll listen. I'm not that stubborn, right? Like if someone has a rationalization that seems valid, then I'm like, got it, cool. But if I've just told you can't do this because you just can't, I'm like, I hate that. It's one of the most aggravating itches that I have. So, you know, what I usually tell people is that the best thing to do is think about who you are, you know, like who you actually are, and like what you are and what your values are, and then do nothing but be unabashedly and unashamed in who you are, right? Like, sorry, be unashamed and unabashedly yourself. Yes. That's the way I would frame it. And why I frame it that way is because it's a multifaceted approach of not only when people reject your desire to be a game designer, if that's what you aspire to be, then just do it, right? Ignore everybody else. If but I've used that same logic. I just did a presentation at ASGC talking about being a queer game developer, and in the same vein, I was just like, when people tell me that I can't be this, I reject it and say I want to be this, because and therefore I just decide that I will be unashamed in who I am as a person. This is so much easier said than done, right? Like, it's easy for me to just be like, oh, just do it, just be yourself, just be confident. And that's a personality trait that I have, is that if I feel confident in my own decisions, I literally don't care what anybody else thinks. But for people who don't have that mentality, who are more timid perhaps, or they just they have a different cultural different cultural background that deviates from that. What I tell them is that design ultimately is a field where you have to challenge convention. They presented you with the convention, so why aren't you challenging it, right? And then just basically take that exact same philosophy that the old guard has, and just say use that and challenge them. Like, this is your agency, right? Like, if you ultimately want to be a designer, and I'm not saying challenge them directly to their face. I'm saying you could just do this in your head, right? Like, if someone in the same vein of like when my mom would say like get mad at me or something, sometimes I'm not gonna argue with her. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, okay, mom, and then I'll be like, she's so wrong, and I just like keep it in my head. Right? I'm not gonna say it out loud, otherwise the sandal comes back out. And in that same vein, when I'm talking to if I talk to a designer and I'm like, there's no way I can change this person's mind, I'll be like, I'll just nod along, right? And I'll be like, but I don't agree, right? And that's my method of challenging the convention. If this person says I can't be a game designer, I'll be like, okay, I don't care, right? And I just say, but I affirm it to myself. And then the key thing is, this is a really odd one. There's a book that I have actually, surprisingly, right here, the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And what I like to do is I wake up every morning and I look in the mirror and I'm just like, I make good games. I'm good at game design. I do good things, right? And people are like, it feels weird to just like go and compliment yourself in a mirror. But I think sometimes that behavior actually is like so inspiring, really, to like, and it helps you a shit ton. I'll be honest, guys. Like I've been down in the dumps the last couple of months because like my game was going, my company was going down under, and I was like, I'm sitting there as the data dude looking at it and like, yeah, we're screwed. We're all gonna lose our jobs in 2 months, but I can't tell anybody, because otherwise I would get in trouble. So despite that, at a certain point I was like, was there stuff that I could have done? Could I have been a better designer? All that, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna look at myself in the mirror and remind myself that I'm enough, that I'm good enough, that what I'm doing is, not reflective of my skill as a designer. Someone else telling me that I'm not good does not mean that I'm not good at game design, blah, 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 blah. And I think that's probably the healthiest and best way to tackle it, is to just remind yourself that, like, you go back to what I said earlier, like in the previous slide, right, is like, we're all game designers. If a toddler can do it, you can do it too. So if a guy tells you that you can't be a game designer, just think to yourself, like, I've made games before, even if you have literally made games before, like, more like interactive media, sick, even better. You validated it yourself. You already did it. Now, if you haven't made games before, you just think back and it's like, well, I have when I was a kid. You just haven't done it recently. That's the only distinction. You took a gap year, a gap decade, gap 20 years, right? So it's all about just reframing your thinking, I think, and that's how I would probably talk about it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, and I'm just gonna say too, yeah, I love that workbook too. I think the brain is, at least my brain, I think probably a lot of other folks' brains too, are really good at forgetting all the cool stuff we've done in the past, but really, 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 really good at forgetting the good stuff, and really bad at forgetting the bad stuff. And so I think doing stuff like daily affirmations, or like going through like those kind of workbooks, like things like that, and just sort of building a habit out of it is a great way to just have that recency of like remembering each day, taking some time to be like, yeah, I am good. Yeah, that's awesome. But
Yeah,
anyways,
exactly.
thank you so much again for this, and I'm sorry to hear about the company.
Oh, no worries. I'm like very, very much like in a positive space right now, so I'm like not like too strained about it. I'm quite frankly, that experience was so turbulent, and I was, when I got laid off, I was like, when our company actually shut down, I was like, God, that's a relief. Like that's how bad it was at the end.
I hear that, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, thanks so much.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that advice to take care of yourself and be confident in yourself is a great way to end this talk. We are just about out of time unless there's any last comments anyone has. Okay,
Well,
Tamerlane,
I had
thank you very
I
much
had a
for giving this really informative
Wait,
talk.
Tony,
Oh,
there's
okay.
Will had like one
Will.
thing he was trying to say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the chat.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Will.
I was just sort of curious about like marketplace design and you know like because I know you were saying you're like a economic designer, so I was just curious on like how you are able to maneuver sort of like the legalities and even the design processes of having to transition like real money to like in-game currency and like back and forth and like security that's involved with that and stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. I think that I think this particular question has a very the answer to it is like quite long. Here's what I would recommend because I think I want to give you a better answer, not a half-assed answer. For anybody interested, I'm gonna post my LinkedIn in the general chat or the general text channel. And then Will, do me a favor. Send me connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever or in Discord, and let me give you a better answer than a half-baked answer. Just because that one's like really, really, really that's gonna take like a pretty long time to go over.
Yeah.
But I think I wanna make sure I actually give you a real answer. So yeah, if any like I said, like I posted LinkedIn in the VC chat, I posted in the general chat in the Discord. If anyone has any questions, hit me up. Otherwise, I'm super happy and appreciate getting to chat with you guys. I'm gonna be in the DMV again for MagFest, so connect with me. If you guys are going to MagFest, hit me up because I'll probably see you there. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Dope.
Thank you, Tamerlane.
Of course. Bye.